very happy to see you all here tonight. We've been looking forward to this event for a long time. As a lot of you know, we had to postpone because of the pandemic. So I'm glad to be here with you all tonight. A few more things before we get started. Coming up, we are hosting Fight Club author Chuck Palahniuk for his new book, The Invention of Sound. We've also got tech meets science fiction writer Cory Doctorow for his new novel, Attack Surface. You can find out more and get early notification of our upcoming events at berkeleyarts.org. Booksmith's doing a ton of virtual events right now also. We're in the middle of a 6-event series with UC Press, which is focusing on urgent societal issues from immigration to fascism, mass incarceration, coerced labor, climate change, and Black labor in the making of America. That series is called UC Press Now, Urgent Conversations, hosted by Booksmith, and is every Monday at 11 a.m. Pacific time for the next 4 weeks. Tonight, though, we're of course here to celebrate the new book by Shaun King, Make Change, How to Fight Injustice, Dismantle Systemic Oppression, and Own Our Future, which you can order directly from Booksmith. I'll drop that link in the chat shortly. The book offers a look at the moments that have shaped Shaun's life and considers the ways that social movements can grow and evolve. Shaun King was recently named by Time magazine as one of the 25 most important people in the world online. He covers civil rights issues for The Intercept and is writer-in-residence at the Fair Punishment Project at Harvard Law School. Previously, King served as a pastor, teacher, and full-time motivational speaker in Atlanta's juvenile justice system. In 2019, King launched the media platform The North Star, which has hundreds of thousands of members and subscribers. His podcast, The Breakdown, has remained one of the most popular news and politics category on Apple with over 100,000 subscribers. He lives in Brooklyn with his family. A few house items before we get started. Obviously, you're muted, but I encourage you to engage in the chat. If you have any questions for Shaun at any point, to please ask there. We will have time for a Q&A at the end of the program. We do have a one-strike policy in the chat. Nothing hateful, no trolling, please. We will remove you and you won't be able to get back in. Don't do that to yourself. And finally, if you'd like to get a copy of the book, I just dropped the link in the comments. We're offering free shipping throughout San Francisco and the East Bay. That's it for me. Shaun, congratulations on the book, and thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thanks, Evan, and good to see you, man, and nice to meet you tonight. And for everybody who just joined, feel free to turn your camera on. Don't worry about your outfit or or your hair or anything else. It's good to see you. I'm glad to see you. I love San Francisco and love the Bay Area. And my book was originally supposed to come out in April. And we had booked events in venues all over the country. And we actually spent months on the tour. And we had nearly 20,000 people who had registered for the events all over the country. And when the book was supposed to come out in April, it was the height of the pandemic where I am now here in Brooklyn. Our office has been closed, our office for the North Star, our studio for our podcast. I'm actually in the basement of my house. The whole family is a little mad at me because now our little room to watch television is now my podcast studio, which is such a bummer for the whole family. Nobody thinks it's cool or anything. So I'm here in the basement of our house in Brooklyn. And in April, the pandemic was ravaging even my own neighborhood. Hundreds of people died literally here in our neighborhood. Almost 6,000 people died here in Brooklyn alone, more than almost every state in America. And we thought when we decided to postpone the book, which was supposed to come out in April, and then canceled the tour, our thought was if we push it forward to August, the pandemic will definitely be over. And we learned the hard way that while it is virtually over for almost every developed country around the world, they've found ways to flatten the curve. They've found ways to create systems that have virtually eliminated it. I saw where New Zealand went 101 days without having a single case. This week, the United States crossed 5 million cases. And the pandemic, which I had thought was, I've lived in California on 2 different occasions. I love California. And every time I come out to San Francisco or Oakland or the Bay Area, I always ask myself, why do I not live in this beautiful place? I know it's complicated. The Bay is beautiful, but it also has pain and inequity and injustice. I'll talk a little bit about some of that. But I also thought the pandemic was done in California, and of course it's not. And so my heart goes out to all of you who might be touched by it. I've done almost 50 different eulogies at Zoom funerals all over the country, often looking just like this, where families were not allowed to be inside of churches or mosques or synagogues or funeral homes. And you may not know this, and maybe you're not even religious, but I was a pastor for many years. And even though I'm not super religious nowadays, I've had to lean on some of those old muscles and skills to try to guide families through super painful moments. So I'm glad to be with you. I'm glad to see your faces. And it's my honor to spend the next hour with all of you. I look forward, and I hope you'll promise me, when we're able to finally meet. It almost seems like maybe it won't come, but it will. If we're able to meet in person in the next year, or maybe it's 2 years from now, I don't know. I hope you come out, and I'd love to see you face to face. And we'll even be risky and give each other high fives and hugs. And hopefully the pandemic will have been suppressed in such a way that human touch will be safe again. But I have a few rules and hopes of my own, if you don't mind. I hope you comment in the chat. I also hope you do things like nod your head if I say something that's halfway smart. I hope you please smile at my jokes. You could laugh even though you're muted. Show me something that resembles laughter so I know that my jokes are funny. These are the challenges of August of 2020. And I'm still delighted to try to work through these challenges with you. But I want us to interact. I'm looking at you. I see all of us here, and it encourages me to have this moment. So thank you. Before we start, I want to tell you why I wrote this book. I then hope to share two primary lessons from the book, and I'm going to read a little bit of chapter 2 as well. You know, people tell so many lies and stories, and we kind of live in the age of misinformation. I was paid to write this book over a year ago, and it took me nearly a year to write it. And when I sell it and promote it, I see people every day, even in my comments, say like, look at this guy getting rich off of selling books, and they don't know how the book industry works. And I was paid a modest amount a year ago to write it, and will never be paid again. I don't get paid when you buy it. I am here tonight because I poured my heart and soul into it. I wrote what I think are some of the most important, some of the most difficult lessons I've learned. But the book is it's not an autobiography. I hope to write an autobiography, years from now. The book is autobiographical in places, but the book is really about my philosophy of change, how change works, how change is made. It is more of a guide for how you can tilt and use your life to change the world. And it's more of a manifesto than it is a memoir. Tonight, I'll read some of the memoir to you, and I'll tell you why. But first, I want to tell you why I wrote it. In 2014, I was actually living in California, and my family and I had lived in Atlanta for many years. Just give me a thumbs up if everybody can hear me clearly. The volume and stuff is good? Good. We'd lived in Atlanta for almost 20 years. My wife and I went to college there, and I got a job in Southern California, and I was the director of communications for an environmental charity, which people are surprised about, because in today's world, we get reduced to who we are on Instagram today, or our worst tweet or a viral moment. Um, even before the pandemic, I would bump into people on the train in New York, and people would be like, "Are you that guy from Instagram?" And I would say, "Yes, I am on Instagram, but I'm definitely more than just the guy on Instagram." And in 2014, I was doing something totally different. My family had moved out there. We have 5 kids, and we had moved to Southern California. I was the director of communications for a group called Global Green. And from the day Eric Garner was killed, which was in July of 2014, until today, since he was killed until today, I've traveled to 47 states. Of course, I've been all over California. Even just this year, I traveled all over the state and campaigning for Bernie. But I've been to most counties in California, but I've been as far north as Alaska. I traveled and taught and organized in North and South Dakota, Wyoming, deep in the heart of the South in the Mississippi Delta, all over South Carolina, Alabama. I traveled to dozens of cities all over Texas. I've been to, I think, the 65 largest cities in the country, all learning, trying to lead, trying to organize, trying to teach. And over these 6 years, everywhere I go, I get some version of the same question from elders, from people who are literally in their 80s and 90s, to children who are in elementary school, middle school, and high school, who come out to hear me speak or come out to an event, to conservatives and liberals, to people of every background, persuasion, ethnicity, nationality. Every day I get this question via DM, on Instagram, on people find my email, and they ask me some version of this. Shaun, I am frustrated about, and you can fill in the blank. They may say injustice, racism, bigotry. They may say global warming, climate change, police brutality. They may be very specific. Shaun, I'm frustrated about what happened. I'm angry about what happened to George Floyd, to Breonna Taylor, to Ahmaud Arbery. But Shaun, I'm frustrated. They may say, Shaun, I've done petitions. I've made phone calls. Shaun, I've marched and demonstrated. But Shaun, how do I actually use my life to change this issue? How do I use my life to actually reduce police brutality? How do I use my life to confront racism, bigotry, inequity, inequality? And for the past 6 years, every time I've answered that question thousands of times. If I have a minute, I'll try to condense my answer to 60 seconds and try to at least give them some type of meaningful truth in that 60 seconds. If I have 5 minutes, I'll try to pack it with several nuggets so that it's meaningful. But having answered that question thousands of times, I came to understand that no matter how many times I spent a minute or 2 minutes or a tweet or DM trying to answer it, that even though it's often a really simple sounding question, how do I use my life to actually change the world? It sounds simple, but the answer, an honest answer, is actually way more complicated, a nuanced answer, an answer that could actually be used in a way is way harder to give than the question is to ask. And I don't think I haven't led people astray with my answers. I've tried, but the truth is everybody's gotten bits and pieces. And eventually I just said a sincere answer will take time. And I took almost a year to do the research, to do the reflecting, to do the writing, to do the editing, and to finally produce a book out of that. During some of that year, we were fighting for change up and down California. I was writing the book when we were campaigning for Chesa Boudin to be the district attorney of San Francisco. I was writing the book when Bernie Sanders actually won California, which ended up not being this big moment in political history, but it was actually a huge deal that was even remotely possible. It seemed like an impossibility just a few years ago. And we thought that my calculation was that if Bernie won California, Bernie would win. That was my calculation. And so I campaigned, I think I did nearly 50 different events all over the state, anywhere, anytime. And I think I saw a few of you at some of those events, and was glad to see you there. In the end, out of all of the research and writing came this book. It's 272 pages of me trying to answer the best I know how of how you can use your life, no matter who you are, where you are, no matter what stage of life you're in, no matter how much experience you have trying to change the world. If you've been fighting for it your whole life or you're just getting started, I wrote this book for you, with you in mind. And as much as I do hope you enjoy it, and I do hope you're inspired by it. More than anything, it's a book that I wrote for you to live. And more than anything, I'm hoping that you get something from it that changes the way you see how you can impact the world. I want to share two big lessons, if you don't mind. And I also want to, if you love audiobooks, I want to promote our audiobook, which we spent almost a year producing. I narrate it, but we have 5 original songs that we recorded that you'll hear throughout. It has amazing, moving guest voices throughout, including the family of Breonna Taylor. If you don't know, Breonna Taylor was an essential worker who had just worked a double shift as a paramedic in Louisville, who broke no laws, no rules. Police literally broke into her home and shot her in the middle of the night after a hard day's work. And her family is in the audiobook. Bernie reads his foreword. The rapper Chuck D does the intro. But there are lots of leaders and voices from all types of backgrounds that are there, and I'd love for you to hear it. When I was living in Southern California, and we used to travel up, we would make that long trip. I don't know if people in the Bay make the long trip to Southern California, if that's something you do. But yeah, we always made the trip up to the Bay. And depending on which way you take, the trip can either kind of suck or be really beautiful. It can be one of the two. But we drove up from Southern California. We drove up to the Bay, dozens of times, and we camped at national parks from Sequoia and others, and did all of that. But in July of 2014, I was working at Global Green, and I would, as you know, have any of you lived in Los Angeles before? The traffic is a little better since the pandemic. It's starting to get back to itself again. But traffic was horrible, and so I would leave my house sometimes at 6:30 in the morning and get to the office like at 7 or 7:30, so I wouldn't have to be in traffic. And I got to work super early, and that always means that if I get there at 7:30, all of my friends on the East Coast, it's already 10:30. And I got a Facebook message from a buddy of mine that I went to Morehouse with, a school in Atlanta that I went to. And he sent me a video that he had found on YouTube, and he described the video, and what he described to me, I couldn't even contextualize what he was telling me. And you have to almost go back in time, because what he described to me sounded like somebody had just been lynched, and my brain could not calculate how what he was describing me was in a video on YouTube. And in July of 2014, there had never been a viral video of somebody being killed by police. Since July of 2014, I have now studied over 500 videos of people being killed by police. But on that day, there had never been such a thing before. And when he described what was in the video, I hadn't even clicked the link yet. He told me that there was a middle-aged black man on a street corner in New York who was unarmed, nonviolent, and that police came up from behind him and began choking him. And that they continued choking him, and the man clearly told them that he couldn't breathe, and they choked him and continued doing it until he died. And I remember thinking, and I say this in the book, like embarrassingly so, I remember thinking, like, my friend left something out. Like, that can't be the whole story. Like, that the police came up behind a man and choked him to death in broad daylight. And I clicked on the video, and it was just as my friend had described. Police did indeed. An officer named Daniel Pantaleo, who had been suspended from the force multiple times, who had been sued over and over and over and over again for misconduct. The city had paid out tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars for his misconduct, walked right up behind Eric Garner and literally put what many of us would recognize as a rear naked choke, a martial arts move on Eric Garner, and choked him and continued doing it until he died. And I had never actually seen a man die before. Not in real life. I'd seen it in movies, but I was shook by it. And I always love to give Global Green a shout out because I never worked another day at Global Green again. They paid me, they paid me for another month. I didn't deserve another. I think I got 2 more paychecks, but I did not deserve another paycheck because that was literally the last day that I worked for the company. I decided to throw myself into trying to find out how we could get justice for Eric Garner's family. I came to know his mother. I came to know his wife. I came to know his children, his daughter, Erica, who campaigned with us, campaigned with Bernie all over the country. Erica literally died fighting for justice for her father. She was 29 years old when she died, just 2 years ago. And I knew that what I had witnessed was so egregiously wrong that we would get justice for it. 3 weeks later, a teenage boy named Michael Brown was shot and killed by police, and he was a boy. He had just finished summer school. People make him into a monster or a man. He was neither. He was a kid. He had literally just finished summer school, where he was the marshal that led his summer school class through the graduation. The previous weekend, if you ever see a picture of Michael Brown in a white dress shirt and a St. Louis Cardinals hat, that was at his father's wedding the previous weekend, where he was the best man. And the next day, we learned of a young man in Los Angeles named Ezell Ford who had been killed by police. And then we learned of a young man named John Crawford who had just been shot and killed by police in Ohio. And I said to many of those families something that I then said to the family of Tamir Rice, who was shot and killed by police that same November. As we organized for Eric Garner, Michael Brown, Ezell Ford, John Crawford, Tamir Rice, I told you earlier, I had been a pastor for years, and I was used to giving hard news to families. I had been a chaplain. I had been a counselor. And so I wasn't afraid to go into hard places and be with families and be present with them. But I found myself like wanting to say something encouraging to many of these families. And I said something I was on the phone with Tamir's uncle. Tamir was a 12-year-old boy. And I was on the phone with his uncle and his mother, Samaria. And I said to them something I said to so many families that I have since come to deeply regret saying. I said to them, hold on. Hang in there. We're going to get justice for your family. And I believed it. I believed we would get justice for Tamir Rice. when I said that to Tamir's family, when I said that to Erica Garner, when I said that to families across the country for almost 2 years before I stopped, I believed we would get justice. In fact, I never imagined there would be a scenario that none of those families would get justice. My brain could not compute. I knew that these cases were egregious wrongs, that they broke the law, that they broke policy. And by and large, none of those cases even went to court. And I couldn't imagine that the next year, when Freddie Gray was killed, when Sandra Bland died in police custody, I couldn't imagine the following year when Alton Sterling, or a man named Terrence Crutcher, who was the twin brother of my friend Dr. Tiffany Crutcher, was shot and killed by police in Oklahoma. I said this to Valerie Castile, the mother of Philando Castile. When I saw what happened to Philando, he was shot and killed on Facebook Live. He broke no laws, no policies, did nothing to warrant violence. He didn't even deserve a ticket. They weren't speeding. The reason they were pulled over was bogus and was racial profiling in the first place. And I said to Philando Castile's family, hold on, hang in there. We're going to get justice for your family. And I knew, I don't gamble, but I would have bet everything that the family of Philando Castile would have gotten justice, and they didn't. And it sent me down a path that ultimately led to me writing this book. And I learned a very hard lesson, and it's the first lesson I want to share with us tonight. And I hope that you develop a radar. Do you know when you buy a shirt or a car or something, and then all of a sudden you then see that car everywhere? You know what I'm talking about? Like the car you drive, you then see the model of it all over town. Or, if you get anything, like if you get a hat or a shirt or a dress or anything, you then have a heightened sensitivity. And you're like, my wife does this sometimes, and she'll be like, she has on my dress. and I want to give you that, but for something else. I want to give you that sensitivity because I'm afraid we're about to see it in relation to the murders of Ahmaud Arbery, who was jogging and was effectively lynched by 3 bigoted white men in South Georgia. I'm afraid we're absolutely going to see this with Breonna Taylor, and I'm afraid we're going to see it even in the murder of George Floyd. In this country, people in power, and when I say people in power, I don't mean Republicans, I don't just mean Trump, I mean Democrats, I mean Republicans, I mean corporate executives, I mean leaders of our biggest, most influential corporations and charities. People in power want to substitute awareness of our greatest problems for action for those problems. And what they want to do, and I've seen it, I've felt it, I've walked families through it, and it has literally, I work with families. I spoke to Michael Brown Sr. 3 days ago on the anniversary, the 6-year anniversary of the murder of his son. I had an exchange with Eric Garner Jr. just 2 days ago. Many of these families are literally stuck because they don't know how to proceed, because it appeared that the whole world acknowledged what happened to your loved one was wrong, but we're not going to do anything about it. And that is a deep American trend, and it is highly American. You may remember just less than 2 years ago now, there was a mass shooting in New Zealand. Its only mass shooting. And the president of New Zealand then said, we will never have a shooting like that again. We may not be able to stop all acts of violence, but what happened there will never happen again. We are banning all assault rifles. You must bring them in. If you don't, we will come get them. They are effectively banned. You can have them no more. And what happened with that mass shooting will literally never happen again. And in this country, though, our leaders are willing to paint Black Lives Matter on the street. And listen, I actually love that. I think symbols do matter. I'm not being facetious. It's beautiful to see it painted. I love murals. I love art. But what I see is from leaders, including Joe Biden, and including others who say, that's wrong. I see it. They may even say Black Lives Matter, but then actually do nothing about it. And we see that with mass shootings, with school shootings. We effectively see it in most of the country with climate change, that people are trying to convince us that being aware of the problem is going to be their solution. And awareness, and a lot of what we do builds awareness. Our tweets, our hashtags, our trending topics, even our marches, our protests, our demonstrations. We should do all of them, but we should do them with the full knowledge that awareness does not create a direct line to change. This country is fully willing to be completely aware of its worst problems and actually not do a single substantive thing to change it. And that only will change with the second lesson that I hope to share with you in just a moment. I hope, because I've seen several polls and studies that I was deeply encouraged by that show that Black Lives Matter has the highest approval rating that it's ever had, that more people than any measured point in American history say systemic racism and inequality is real. The highest number of Americans say that. More people, including you, are reading really, really profound books and research and text, and you're talking about them and you're learning what it means to be anti-racist. But what if we only have heightened awareness, but don't actually do anything about our worst problems? This book begins with what we do after awareness. And that's where I hope I can take you even over the next few minutes. My family and I was thinking of this just a few minutes ago. My family just had dinner, and just as a quick illustration, imagine if you piled, and if it doesn't matter what you pile on your plate, but imagine you have a glass plate and you put your favorite food on there, and it was crafted with love and care, and it's delicious. And for some clumsy reason, the plate slips out of your hand. It shatters on the floor. The food can't be salvaged because now there's shards of the plate intermixed with the food. And imagine you grabbed your phone and you took a picture of the shattered plate. Maybe you even took a video and you posted it on your Facebook or Instagram and said, I can't believe I had this clumsy moment of shattered food and a broken plate. You do know that even if you are aware of that plate being broken on the ground, and now your friends and family are aware, now the world is aware, being aware that the plate is shattered on the ground with food splattered everywhere doesn't clean it up, right? Eventually, you have to move from saying, I'm aware, and I want you all to now know that I'm aware. You eventually have to get a broom. It's a hard thing to do. You have to get a broom and sweep it up. It then kind of semi-ruins the broom because now it's caked with wet food. You have to get the glass. You have to wipe it and mop it and get being aware that you did that or that it happened doesn't clean the mess up. And in this country, we seem to be willing to take pictures of the mess, to share it, to make it trend, for it to be breaking news, for it to dominate conversation, but then not actually do the work to clean it up. And I want you to develop the radar where you then see, oh, they are trying to convince us that them being aware of this horrible problem is good enough. And I think what you'll find is it's like, imagine everybody had your car. It's like, imagine all of a sudden everybody had your favorite shirt. And you're going to see it is coming even from, I respect your governor a great deal. I have criticisms of him. I've been able to speak with him and interact with him. But I'm wondering, what are the substantive policies that he will advance that will actually reduce not just mass incarceration, but incidents of police violence and more? We can talk about that. I want to read a part of chapter 2 of my book, and it's a deeply personal part of my story, but I want to read it in light of your story. Chapter 2 is about my story, but chapters 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 are actually all about your story. And it's me in those chapters trying to help you decide where your story goes next, and even show you how much agency you have in making vital decisions on how you use the rest of your days. All right. And I want to share a deeply personal story, and it begins on page 34. All right. Is everybody with me? Good. Hey, George, how you doing, man? Thank you for your thumbs up, George. I appreciate it. Tamara, thank you. Tamara, sometimes when I'm speaking, I try to find a smile every now and then. So thank you for flashing a grin every now and then, Tamara. It helps. Yeah. Thanks. You even show some teeth. Hey, Vanessa, you doing okay? Yeah, good. Emily, we share the same last name, Emily. That's cool. Yeah, we even resemble each other a little bit. It's just a little. Yeah. When you denied that, I don't know if that was an insult or what. Like no, you don't. Yeah, I'm just messing with you, Emily. Meg, I see you. Meg, on my screen, you're down in the corner. You're in the bottom left corner of my screen. I don't know where you are in your screen, but hey, Karen. You have family there with you? Yeah, that's family. Yeah, good to see you both. Everybody's good? Good. Yeah, glad to see you. Who is Mel? Because I see two people, but which one is Mel? And Mel? Oh, okay. Yeah, good to see you both. Ezra, how you doing, bro? Yeah, good to see you. Hey, Kurt, you good? Yeah, great. Sorry, no, I could just call on everybody, and I would love to do that. Hopefully, before we go, at the end of the night, maybe Evan will unmute us all, and we'll get to say bye to each other. Okay. This is page 34. The chapter is called My Story. I'm going to read for a few minutes. Hey, Brandon, you doing okay? Yeah, good, bro. So, yeah. All right, you can hear me fine? Yeah, good. This is chapter 2, My Story. I need you to go back in time with me. Before Trump, before Obama, before Twitter, before Google, before Netflix, before text messages, way before all of that. I need you to go back to March the 8th of 1995. Apartheid had just ended, and Nelson Mandela was in his first year as president of South Africa. Tupac and Biggie were still alive and at the top of their game. And on a random spring afternoon during my sophomore year of high school, everything changed for me. If getting that Facebook message about Eric Garner in July of 2014 altered the trajectory of my adult life, then no single moment in time impacted my young life more than what I'm about to tell you. It almost ruined me. But had it not happened, I'm completely sure that my life would have taken a very different path. Let me take you back there. Man, Look at those stupid rednecks, always messing around and shit, I said to my friend LaRon as we glanced at a fight that had broken out among the future farmers of America. That was, I'm speaking to you now, that was the name of an organization in our school. And yeah, so some of you are familiar with it. Fights were far from rare at our rural high school. It was the only high school in our small factory and farm town of about 8,000 people named Versailles, Kentucky. Somebody always had beef that they wanted to settle and fight through. And on this day, the rural farm boys had clearly had some type of falling out with one another. We chuckled, half glad that it had nothing to do with us for a change. Woodford County High School was a pressure cooker of racial violence and tension, an environment where bigotry was felt on a near daily basis. Students wore Confederate flag paraphernalia. Racial slurs were regularly dropped in conversations. And the words, "I hate niggers," were written on the bathroom stalls of our school so frequently that we literally didn't even report it. It was just the norm. I'm going to stop there and I'm going to skip through about 14 pages that I want you to read on your own time. And I just want those to unfold for you on your own, but very important. I'm going to skip to page 49 at the bottom of page 49, back to that day. My homie LaRon and I were in a good mood that fateful Wednesday afternoon. The hardest part of our school day was over, and we were just shooting the shit and chilling at the black hangout spot before I had to head to class. Of course, there were no colored-only signs for us at this spot. But like clockwork, before school started, between classes, and after the final school bell rang, if you had a drop of melanin, you hung out in the corner by the entrance to the gymnasium. It wasn't special, but damn it, it was ours. This was where we lovingly cracked jokes on one another, talked about which girls had the biggest booty, sorry y'all, and argued over whether East Coast or West Coast hip hop was better. Maybe you all have feelings about that too, I don't know. For all I knew, that little spot by the gym had been the black hangout spot for decades. If I didn't stop, the walk from our hangout spot to my band class normally only took me about 30 seconds. If I busted a fast jog, I could do it in less. Had I known that I was about to meet my maker, I would have brought LaRon with me on that short journey. He was a big dude, barrel-chested, a linebacker on the football team. Also as jolly as could be, but somebody that only a fool would cross. Me, on the other hand, in spite of my growth spurt that year, I was still smaller than Allen Iverson. I was scrappy, but that didn't really strike fear in anybody. When I turned around to give LaRon some dap and told him that I would see him later, I had no reason to second guess myself. I had made that brisk walk from the gym to band class hundreds of times across the previous 3.5 semesters, and those treks were consistently uneventful. This was my safe hallway. I could think of 10 different places in the school that felt dangerous to me, but that path was simply not one of them. My guard was all the way down, even though there was a rowdy group of rednecks fighting ahead. As I got closer to the group of about 15 or 20 people, something peculiar happened. Hey, Barbara, I'm on the top of page 51. You see me? Oh, okay, cool. I just want to make sure you knew where we were. The crowd, which had just been unruly enough for LaRon and me to comment on a few minutes before, grew eerily silent. It was unnerving, but I didn't know what to make of it as I walked to move past them. Suddenly, I heard one voice say, "That's him," and another say, "Yeah, that's Shaun King," before a third voice yelled, "Go." That crowd that LaRon and I had just chuckled about wasn't there because they were fighting one another. They were there for me. In seconds, I was surrounded on every side by a group of bloodthirsty country boys without a friend in sight or a teacher to intervene. Before I had time to thoughtfully consider an exit, I felt a wallop against the back of my head as if I had been hit with a baseball bat. Strangely, I felt no pain. While the blow did not knock me out, it knocked every bit of intelligence out of me. Like most boys in the 90s, I had watched every Jean-Claude Van Damme and Steven Seagal movie ever made up until that point. Did anybody ever watch those movies? I don't know if I'm the only one, but those were my favorites. VHS tapes of Lionheart and Hard to Kill were in heavy rotation on the 13-inch TV VCR combo that my mother had allowed me to keep in my tiny bedroom. I would watch those movies alone and reenact the fight scenes with regularity, even making the clumsy noises along with Jean-Claude when I would kick the crap out of my invisible enemies. On this day, though, not a single lesson my martial arts heroes had taught me mattered one bit. Soon I felt blows hitting my face and stomach and ribs and back from every angle. I could hear the thuds of fists against my flesh and bones. My glasses went flying off of my face. I was blind without them. I didn't tell my body to crumple, but it seemed like I was no longer in charge of what it did from that point forward. I instinctively curled up in the fetal position and tried to cover my face as steel-toed work boots punted and stomped and pounded my body. It seemed as if time had slowed to a snail's pace, and my mind began drifting somewhere strange. Blow after blow continued to rain down on me, but I was growing numb and distant from it all. I knew instinctively that something terrible was happening, but I soon found myself not even caring about it. Darkness began enveloping my mind as I drifted out of consciousness. I then heard a girl screaming at the top of her lungs. Days later, I learned that it was my good friend Joyce, who realized that it was me on the ground getting mauled. Joyce's screams caused enough of a commotion to attract teachers to the scene. When the students told Mr. Carter, who was our band director, that it was me on the ground, he too entered the fray to help break it up. He made sure Joyce and other band students who were caught up in the melee all went safely back to class. As teachers and staff swarmed in and intervened, every student who'd punched and kicked me fled, mainly to a wing of the school that I had never once ventured into that was designed for agricultural studies. I'm almost finished. Amid the chaos, I was somehow left alone on the floor. It still shocks me to this day. That's not in the book. I'm just saying that to you. Bleeding, beaten, and barely conscious. I struggled to get on my feet and began shuffling toward the front office before eventually collapsing against some lockers. It sounds silly now, but I remember feeling crushed that blood had covered my brand new tennis shoes. Money was hard to come by in our house, and I typically only get one new pair of shoes per year. Final paragraph. I could not will myself to get up no matter how hard I tried. Thankfully, one of my best friends, Rico, a pudgy comedic brother who doubled as my barber, found me there, mumbling incoherently to myself. He helped me up and virtually carried me down 2 long hallways to the administrative offices at the front entrance to the school. Once we made it there, I literally collapsed right in the middle of the lobby before they dragged me into an office. That moment, which took me way longer to read than it actually took to experience it, was only about a minute. And it changed the entire trajectory of my life. I missed the rest of my sophomore year and all of my junior year of high school recovering from the injuries. I had 3 spinal surgeries and fractures to my face and ribs. And it was brutally painful. The surgeries were painful. The recovery was painful. I was diagnosed with PTSD, and the emotional trauma, it seems crazy, but the emotional trauma was almost as hard to recover from as the physical trauma of it. And when I finally recovered, I was different. And I don't mean it necessarily in a good way. I lost a lot. I definitely lost whatever my childhood was, that was over. And whatever, I didn't understand it with this language, but there was a degree of innocence that existed before that moment that 18 months later was gone. but it also put something in me. As much, I had been really fit all of my life and had been athletic, and that was gone too. And I've never been fit or athletic since. It just changed. It changed my body, and I'm just have been in a lot of pain ever since. For all that it took out of me, it also put something in me that has everything to do with the final point that I wanted to make tonight. It caused me to have a deep sensitivity to people who were in pain. It caused me to have a heightened, acute awareness for people who had experienced injustice. Nobody who did any of that was ever held responsible. Nobody. And my mother and I sued the school system. We sued the county. My mother was a sweet, simple factory worker there in the town. And I didn't know then what I know now. I didn't understand the law, and she hardly did either. Nobody was held responsible, and we eventually just gave up. I moved to go to college. But then I found myself in a lot of ways. That was 25 years ago, that story. I'm 40 now. I was 15 at the time. It caused me to want to ultimately do so much of what you see me do now every day. I don't even know how I feel about that. And I say in the book that I am not now telling you, because if there are 100 of us here, and a good portion of you have experienced trauma. You don't have to raise your hand or nod your head, but a number of you have experienced something traumatic. I just want to say explicitly, I'm not saying that out of your trauma comes your cause, because if I wanted to, at least I feel free that I could go do whatever I want. I don't have to lead out of my pain. But I leaned into this imprint on my heart to fight for justice for people, to care about justice. But it really wasn't until I was 35 years old, sitting at my cubicle, when I decided that I would then throw my whole life. I'd done a lot of other things before then. I decided to throw my whole life into fighting against police brutality. And in the book, I share a lot of failures, a lot. I share some successes, including helping to elect many of your new district attorney, Chesa Boudin, who's a kind, compassionate soul. It's an incredibly difficult position, but he's the right person for it. But what I really want to know, and why I wrote that story, is I want to know, and I'm going to say something difficult here. I want to know, have you chosen your cause? And before you say yes, or give me a thumbs up, or before you type what it is in the chat, I say in the book something that I want to say to you, and it's a hard truth. And if anybody who's weird enough to spend their Wednesday night with me on Zoom wants to hear a little truth. And so let me just tell it to you how I feel it. The greatest indication that you've chosen a cause isn't if you tell me what you've chosen. The greatest indication would be if I asked your family what your cause is, if I asked your friends, if I asked your neighbors, if I asked your coworkers and colleagues. When you've chosen a cause, yes, you should be able to verbalize it, and that's one way. But when you've actually devoted your life to something, everybody around you will know it. You'll get on their nerves about it. You will be trying to constantly recruit them to it. There will not be a single person in your ecosystem who has ever listened to you who is unaware about what your cause is. That's when you've chosen something. It's not when you're angry about something. It's not when you are aware. So many of you are aware of a problem, and I want you to hear from me. Your problem does not have to be my problem. I don't expect it to be. There are 102 of us here. I would expect there to probably be 60 different causes here. My wife so badly cannot even stomach the police violence work that I do. She stays very far away from it. Her cause is childhood literacy. She's chosen it, and anybody who knows her knows that about her. What's your cause? It could be climate change. It could be something highly specific related to something in the Bay. But whatever it is, here's what I know. That problem won't change until you and others just like you make up in your mind that you're going to throw your whole life into changing it. At first, it may be what you do after work. Eventually, it may replace your work. Eventually, it may become your work. It may become your life. But it requires that level of commitment. And a huge part of why some problems never go away. Now, we are working against great, well-funded forces, don't get me wrong. But not enough people are deciding, I'm not leaving until this changes. And that's the type of decision it takes. And I guide you through how to make that decision in the book. And I hope more and more of you make it. All right. I have a few minutes for Evan and I to answer some questions. And if you have any questions about anything I've said, hello, Karen. Yeah. Hi, Karen. Yeah, I see you all. Did I see you all earlier? Yeah, you seem better lit now. Hey, is that Dad? Yeah. Hey, how you doing? Yeah, good to see you. Yeah, Colleen, Nancy, Miriam. Yeah, good to see all of you. Debbie, Maura, Evan, if there are any questions, I'd be glad to take them. And I see some comments here as well. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. And thank you, Shaun. Yeah, questions are flooding in. Thank you all for all of your questions. The first one I want to ask is from Brandon. He's wondering, thanks for being here, Shaun. What are your thoughts on the popular notion that peace is a surefire and often seen as the only appropriate way to achieve social justice and change? For
Yeah.
example, the denunciation of riots often perpetuated by oppressors.
Yeah. Great question, Brandon, and lots of parts to that. Brandon, that's the Brandon that I spoke to earlier. Give me a thumbs up if that's you. Yeah. Hey, Brandon. Brandon, you may have noticed on my timeline at the height of the protests and demonstrations after George Floyd was killed, every day people asked me to denounce the riots, and I refused. And I even went online and said, I will not denounce these riots. In fact, I don't know that Minneapolis and their city council would have ever voted to disband their police department without them. What I'm not saying is there's a death, you have a riot, everything changes. Like that formula, sometimes that may work. It's not, but life is not a formula in that sense. I don't think people have given nearly enough. I'm not even saying that busting into Target and stealing everything there is safe or advisable. I'm just saying I am not at all convinced that the city of Minneapolis would have caved, because the truth is people had been killed by police in Minneapolis before. The primary difference was, in essence, a very visceral, not necessarily, it wasn't violent as much as it was property damage, but many people called on a lot of us, myself, Tamika Mallory, who was in my audiobook. She's a brilliant civil rights leader who gave what I thought was one of the most important speeches of the summer. Tamika and I both just, we weren't gonna say anything about that. And I say that to say, Brandon, that there is a place for peace. And, you know, what people often ask us to do, and I've been asked many times, people say, Please be peaceful while we investigate this and pursue justice. And then people will be peaceful. And then you wait, and then they give you no justice. And there's a part of me that I'm embarrassed that we live in a nation that has cornered people so badly that they feel they have to, excuse my language because they're kids here, they feel they have to tear shit up to get attention, to get justice. It shouldn't take all of that. But, you know, Malcolm X regularly joked, Brandon, that America's greatest heroes in historic lore often used violence and war. And then all of a sudden, James Baldwin had a very profound point where he also talked about how if a black man literally even just says, give me liberty or give me death, that black who could literally quote a white man who was held in high esteem for saying it. He said, if a black man quotes those very words, who says, give me liberty or give me death, that black man might be arrested, you know, and it's like, and won't be celebrated. So I think you're right. I think your question says all of us are considering what is the right path. What I do see is that there's not a clear, straight path to how we fix these systems. I'll close with this. I then saw some people duplicating the fury of what was happening in Minneapolis, but duplicating it in a way that lacked purpose or intention, and it was kind of just destructive without reason. And so all of these things are difficult to navigate, Brandon, but no, I don't think I'm thankful for people who say, hey, let me find us a nonviolent path. But I'm also gracious that some people are so angry that they say, I see something different. And Brandon, I just have to tell it how I think it, Brandon. And I'm sorry if that offends anybody, but it is what it is. Evan.
Thank you, Shaun. And thank you, Brandon, for your question. Before I ask the next one, I just wanted to share a comment that was in the chat for you, Shaun. What an honor to hear your conversation and your insight on how change is made. This is Oscar Grant's mother. Blessings to you.
Oh, yes. Yeah, you know, Oscar's whole family, I love them so dearly. And, you know, when Oscar was murdered on the platform of the BART train, it was really before hashtags and trending topics like we have it now. I think Oscar would be, he is a household name in the Bay. And I think though he would have, Oscar and his story and that injustice would have been one of the most known stories in the world had it happened a few years later. And I love his family so much. And his Uncle Bobby is like an uncle to many of us. And if you ever see him in the Bay, please support him and support that whole family and beautiful people.
Thanks, Shaun, and love to you, Wanta. The next question is from DW, which is, Shaun, what would a perfect justice system look like for you? We now call it a legal system due to the great lack of actual justice. I now wonder what our future could look like in regards to creating a better system that benefits and cares about everyone.
Hey, Vanessa, somebody loves you, Vanessa. Yeah, somebody loves you there in the house. Man, a perfect legal system. You know, I've never thought of it like that, which is sad because in some ways, even as I heard the question and realized that I had never fully imagined what it would look like if it was actually just, if it was actually fair. You know, I'll start with what I say in the book and what I've said for years is that, and it's what I'm about to say is not a distinction without a difference. It's a big difference. That this system that we have, Who asked the question, or did who was it?
Yeah, this is from DW.
Hey, DW. You know, I always say, I had to teach this to Bernie Sanders, and I've had to, like, behind the scenes, and he made some changes in his speeches and things about this, that the justice system is not broken. It's not. And we have to stop saying that. It's not broken. When something's broken, that means it was well built, well designed, well intentioned, and has somehow deviated from its good design and function. That's not what we have. This system that we have, that we call the justice system or the legal system, it's actually functioning and firing on all cylinders. It's doing exactly what it was built and designed to do. I don't mean that as hyperbole. It was built as a tool of oppression. And I will recommend a couple of books to all of you. Evan, if you want to share these links, if you get a moment. I see them as a trilogy. The first is, they're not a trilogy, but they function that way in my brain. The first is Slavery by Another Name by Douglas Blackman, and it won the Pulitzer Prize. And he was a rather conservative white journalist for the Wall Street Journal. And he one day happened upon an unmarked cemetery in the Atlanta area and became fascinated with why it was there. And he realized that it was a burial ground for black men who had been worked to death in prisons right when slavery ended. And what he found was that after the Emancipation Proclamation, after the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, he found that prisons were built just to replace the workload of slavery, and that men were literally arrested on false pretenses just so that they could be worked to death. And he wrote a brilliant book. The book is over 10 years old now. There's also a short documentary that was on PBS, and it's online and you can watch it. There's a bootleg, and I'm all for bootlegs. There's a bootleg version of it on YouTube. If you don't have a PBS subscription, and PBS, if PBS wanted to remove it, they would have. I'm not being funny. It's been on there for years and years. PBS knows it's there and just kept it there. And so you can watch it on PBS. It's also called Slavery by Another Name, and it's just as profound as the book. The second book would be The New Jim Crow, and by Michelle Alexander. And I don't know if, I've never asked her if she did this intentionally. She almost picks up exactly where Douglas Blackman leaves off. In some ways, Douglas Blackman takes us up to about 1950. In a lot of ways, Michelle Alexander kind of picks up there and explains how modern mass incarceration came as a result of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. And it was mass incarceration was created as a tool for voter suppression. It's a profound book. And then there's a new book that nobody talks about, and it actually won the Pulitzer. No book has won the Pulitzer Prize and got less coverage than this book. It was written 2 years ago. It's called Locking Up Our Own, and it's by James Forman Jr. He's a professor at Yale Law School. His father was James Forman, a civil rights legend, and James Forman Jr. is brilliant, kind soul, a former public defender in Washington, D.C., and I need to say this because of what I'm about to say, a lifelong Democrat. And the book is about the role, Locking Up Our Own, is about the role of the Democratic Party in building mass incarceration. So guess why that book doesn't go viral? It's painful. Joe Biden is in that book. He's in it a lot. I don't mean that as an insult. Like, it's just fact. And he also deals with the role of black mayors, including Willie Brown and others, in helping to build mass incarceration. It's deep, it's super deep. And it's one of those books that I couldn't believe when it won the Pulitzer. I was like, oh, they made a mistake here. somebody accidentally somebody accidentally acknowledged this book, and somebody's laugh got through there. I don't know, Evan. Somebody snuck a laugh in there, but but thank you for that. So those 3 books help define the system for me in a lot of ways.
Thank you, Shaun, and thank you, GW. The next question that you mentioned, Biden. I'd like to ask you Kurt Zimmer's question. Kurt wants to know, I love your comments on Kamala's evolution. Do you think Biden has evolved too, or is he just going with the political winds of the moment?
Hey, Kurt. Man, I got slammed for my comments on Kamala. I don't know if anybody saw that, but I trended on Twitter for like 20 hours over it. I didn't see that coming. I literally was the #1 trending topic in the country last night. And I was like, what did I do? I wanted to say something that was, conciliatory. I wanted to say something encouraging, even to my progressive audience, even to Californians who feel like they know Kamala's record a little better than most, and San Franciscans who really understand who she is and who she isn't. I wanted to say something that I had really researched and studied, which was that 2020 Kamala Harris, I've been a huge critic of her. And that's people were calling me a hypocrite and a liar and a sellout and things. I've been a huge, huge critic saying, listen, her record, one of my good friends, she helped convict a dear friend of mine in San Francisco for a murder he did not commit. And thankfully, it was eventually overturned 8 years after he was convicted and spent a horrible portion of his life in prison. San Francisco, you then spent $10 million to compensate this man for what was lost. And so, like, my beef with her has been personal. I'll tell you what I said on social media. She has gotten a lot better. I'm not saying she's perfect, and find me the perfect politician. It's not Bernie. It's not your mayor. It's not Chesa Boudin. There are no perfect people. 2020 Kamala Harris is the best Kamala Harris I've ever seen. And I say that having really studied and analyzed how she has evolved on things like marijuana. She has now come out. She's one of the few people in the whole United States Senate who says she's against qualified immunity, which prevents people from suing police. Nobody pressured. And I heard her speak about it, and I was like, oh, excuse my language. I was like, oh, shit. Like, not only did she say she wanted to end it, she said it in the smartest way I'd heard anybody say it. And I thought to myself, like, this woman who led the system in San Francisco and was often even deeply problematic even as Attorney General, she knows this system. And if she ever chose to dismantle it, she could do it. I say that as somebody that's hopeful. I don't have a lot of hope for Joe Biden. I don't, Kurt. He's super. I don't believe in this concept that older politicians can't evolve. And I know it's not true because I watched Bernie grow and evolve on many issues. I personally helped him evolve on issues and saw him tinker with ideas and grow on them and get better with them. And Joe Biden is so deeply resistant to change on Medicare for all and universal health care. He almost completely fails to acknowledge that he was, in essence, the architect of mass incarceration. But here's why I was encouraged. No single person running against him called him out on that more than Kamala Harris. And she called him out on the crime bill and threw power punches at him on his role around integration and segregation. I don't say this as a diss to Bernie. Evan, we couldn't get Bernie to say one bad thing about Joe Biden. It's just not Bernie's way. He struggles with it. And Kamala had no problem calling him out on that, which made me think, well, that it took a degree of courage I rarely, Kurt, have a good thing to say about Joe Biden. It took a real degree of courage for him to choose really the primary candidate who threw hard punches at him in the campaign, to choose that as his running mate. I struggle with Joe Biden a lot, Kurt, for 10 different reasons. Even I think Joe Biden at his very worst still is better than the best version of Donald Trump. I mean, the worst Joe Biden is still is better than Donald Trump on a random good 5 minutes, you know? And I think I am hopeful. I was surprised, for instance, and it wasn't fake either. I was shocked. Several people told me that Joe Biden almost chose Karen Bass as his running mate. And I was like, what? Like, Karen Bass was the most progressive person he could have chosen. And he didn't choose Karen Bass, who was a congresswoman from Los Angeles. But it said to me that he is trying to he chose someone to his left, Kurt. So that I'm trying to search for the positive here. He didn't choose someone to his right or choose someone even that mirrors him. He did choose someone to his left. And final thought there, Evan, Kamala Harris voted with Bernie almost 93% of the time. She may not be a liberal superhero in the traditional sense, but I want to have a quick point about that. Black women in politics, and most women in politics, but particularly Black women in politics. I've written about this. I've written articles in a series about this when I was at the New York Daily News. Can't rise up through the ranks and be revolutionaries. To be a Black woman in politics, to be a Black woman in corporate America, generally means you are the master at playing by most rules. It means you primarily color within the lines, and you may push it a little bit, but it's hard to be a Black woman in politics and ever win statewide office and be radical. Bernie, who is my mentor, who wrote the foreword to this book, is as a privileged white man, gets celebrated when he breaks the rules. You're a Black woman in politics, you lose your profession if you do that. And so the privilege that Bernie has, Kamala, Stacey Abrams, and other Black women who are in politics don't get to they may have some of the same cards, but they don't get to play them in the same way. And in a way, I'm asking us to grade a Black woman in politics on a scale that's different than how you would grade your favorite white male politician. They have to play by different rules, and we have to consider that in how we think of Kamala's history. Doesn't mean there's not problems and critiques there. It's a different game for her.
Thank you, Shaun. And thank you, Kurt, for that question.
Yep.
I think we have time for just one more. I know
that's fine. Yep.
We've gone over a bit. Thank you all so much for your great questions.
Yeah.
The one I want to end on is from Ezra. Ezra's asking, Shaun, do you think there's a meaningful way for a musician or artist to contribute to pursue social justice change through their art? Or do you think activism is the only way, or perhaps just the most impactful way?
Hey, Ezra. Yeah, Ezra, thank you for that question. Ezra, musicians and artists ask me that all the time, man. And I'm going to tell you what I've told them, and I hope it's not disappointing to you. I hope maybe it's encouraging for you. I do hope that musicians and artists of all kinds, I do hope that there are moments of activism for them. I do. Like moments where you speak out, moments where you march and protest. But I have told most of my friends who are some of the most known artists and musicians, and some are independent artists. I've told them my hope is that I had a buddy of mine who's like for lack of better words, is like a love singer. And I told him, I was like, bro, we really need your love music. Like, if you want to do it, if you want to do a woke song, do it. That's fine. I'm speaking to him. I said, but listen, man, like when I'm at home, I don't necessarily want you to do a woke song. Like if I'm with my wife, I want to hear a love song. I told a friend of mine who's a comedian, I said, listen, I hope you can weave some social justice into your comedy. But man, I mainly want you to make us laugh because it's hard. It's hard out here. Life is hard. And I said, so listen, if you get to weave, Karen, I'm sorry I cuss a little bit. In New York, we cuss a little bit. I don't know if you cuss a little bit in your house. So I know I see some younger people in the room, but you know, like sometimes life is so hard that we just want to hear some funny shit, you know. We just want to smile, you know, um like some of my favorite artists, Ezra, they're not talking about anything conscious at all. And what they do is sometimes they give us an escape. They may show us beauty. I think there's a real role for what art does. Let me close with this, Evan and Ezra. A couple years ago, I don't know if I included this in the book or not. It was in 2015. I love basketball and I watch the NBA. And I love the Warriors, and they'll be back next year, and they'll be better, and they'll get a good draft pick, and they're gonna be awesome this coming year. And I was watching basketball, and it was after so many horrible injustices had just happened. I found myself feeling real guilty. And I found myself even hating the game. I was like, I can't watch this. This is stupid. People are being killed out here, and I'm watching. And all of a sudden I reduced. I was like, people are being killed out here, and I'm watching men with a leather ball throw it into a metal hoop. How dumb is this? I'm watching men dribble and throw a ball around when people are out here being killed. And for like a month, I couldn't watch it. I just couldn't watch the game. And then I realized, I was like, listen, sometimes I just need to watch the game. And I don't need to watch the game and do something smart. I don't need to watch the game and read make change. Sometimes you just need to laugh. Sometimes you just need to cheer. And this thing is a marathon. And art and recreation and sport and all of that has its place. Normally, if there's a smart moment for you to weave something conscious into your art, Ezra, you'll know it. But I just think there's a real value to doing, I don't mean to say art for art's sake. I don't know if that's the phrase that I'm looking for, but something akin to that. My wife reads fiction books that have nothing to do with Black Lives Matter, and they allow her to escape to a different world, a better world. And that's what art can do. And so, listen, I enjoyed speaking to all of you and seeing you. Thank you to everybody who hung out with us. It's 11:30 here on the East Coast. And so, yeah, thankfully, it's my last event for the night, but look forward to seeing you all in person.
Thank you so much, Shaun.
Yeah.
This has been a wonderful night and conversation. Thank you all so much for joining us. The book is Make Change. You should get a copy for Booksmith for yourself, for your friends, probably for your enemies as well. I'll put that link in the comments again here in a second. hope that we can all meet in person in the nearest future. Until then, take care and be well, everyone.
Yeah. Take care,
Thank you.
everybody. Yeah. Yeah. Good to see you all. Bye now. Yeah. Thank you all for being here. Take care.